"You don't own this lake," that's what she said, standing on my property, pointing at the $3 million man-made lake I'd spent 5 years building, complete with filtration systems, a private dock, and premium landscaping. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Her certainty absolute. She had paperwork. She had the HOA behind her. She'd even already planted a sign reading "Property of Willowbrook HOA" right at the water's edge. What she didn't have was the truth. I stood there, gripping the deed from 1998 in my hand, watching Vanessa Mainstay try to seize something that was never hers. And right then, I knew this wouldn't end with words. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. You'll want to see how this plays out. It was a Tuesday morning, 9:15 a.m., when I first saw her walk through my gate. I'd left it unlocked after taking the trash bins to the curb earlier, a habit I was about to regret. I was standing on the back deck of my house at 42 Lakeside Drive in Willowbrook Estates, coffee in hand, looking out at the lake that had become my pride since retiring from construction engineering 2 years ago. The water reflected the morning sun like polished glass. Then I noticed movement near the shoreline. A woman in her mid-50s, blonde hair pulled back tight, wearing a black blazer and carrying a clipboard, was walking across my lawn with 2 other people trailing behind her. She wore a gold badge pinned to her chest that read HOA President in bold letters. I set my coffee down and headed toward the back gate, my chest already tightening. Something about the way she moved, the deliberate stride, the way she surveyed my property like she was calculating value. It all felt like an invasion. By the time I reached her, she was standing at the edge of the lake, taking photographs with her phone. The 2 people with her, a man and a woman I vaguely recognized from HOA mailings, stood a few feet back, holding folders. I cleared my throat. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She turned to face me, and I got my first good look at Vanessa Mainstay. Her expression was cold, professional, the kind that said she was used to people backing down. "Mr. Garrett," she said, glancing at her clipboard, "I'm Vanessa Mainstay, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. According to the HOA resolution passed on September 3rd, this lake has been designated as common community property. You have 48 hours to transfer management rights to the HOA, or you'll be subject to fines of $500 per day." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "This is my property," I said. "I built this lake in 2019. I have the permits and surveys." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The HOA has reviewed the community master plan, and this lake falls within what we've identified as a common area buffer zone. You've violated the covenant since construction." She gestured to one of the board members, who held up a document I couldn't read from where I stood. I felt my jaw tighten. "I'd like to see that documentation," I said. Mainstay shook her head. "That's internal HOA material. Board members only." The dismissal was quick, practiced, and it immediately set off alarms in my head. HOA covenants were supposed to be accessible to all residents. That was basic governance law. Her refusal wasn't just rude, it was illegal. She was banking on me not knowing my rights. "If you refuse to cooperate," she continued, turning back to the lake and snapping another photo. "The HOA will file a lawsuit for your unlawful occupation of community property. This affects the property values of 200 families. Mr. Garrett, I'm sure you understand the seriousness," is the way she said it. Calm and final. Made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. This was a coordinated move, and I was just supposed to fold. "I need time to review my own documents," I said carefully. Mainstay cut me off. 48 hours after that, we'll be installing signage and restricting your access to the lake. She handed me a business card, then motioned for her colleagues to follow her as they walked past me toward the gate. I caught a fragment of conversation between Mainstay and the male board member. He was saying something about a survey, and she replied in a low voice, "Bennett will love this location." The name didn't mean anything to me then, but something about the quiet satisfaction in her tone made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I stood there watching them leave, my mind racing. This couldn't be legal. I'd had the lake surveyed before construction. I'd pulled permits from the county, paid for inspections, and done everything by the book. I walked back into the house and went straight to the garage, where I kept my important files in a pair of old filing cabinets. It took me 20 minutes of digging before I found what I was looking for. A yellowed folder labeled Lake Construction, 1998 Survey and Permits. The lake had originally been built by the previous owner, a man named Peterson, back in '98, decades before the HOA was even established in 2005. When I bought the house in 2018, all documentation had transferred to me. I opened the folder and saw the surveyor's report showing the exact property boundaries. The lake sat well within those lines. I made a mental note to call a licensed surveyor first thing in the morning. If Mainstay wanted to play games with property rights, I'd make damn sure I had ironclad evidence on my side. That evening, I received an email from Mainstay. The subject line read, Notice of Property Transfer, Willowbrook Lake. I opened it with a sinking feeling. The email was formal, almost clinical in tone. It demanded that I sign an attached document transferring management rights of the lake to the HOA within 48 hours. Attached was a low-resolution map, too blurry to make out any real detail. At the bottom, in bold text, it read, Failure to comply will result in daily fines, legal action, and potential lien on your property. I read it once, then called an old colleague who'd gone into real estate law after retiring from engineering. He listened to my explanation, then gave me the advice I needed. Don't sign anything, he said, and get your hands on that original deed and surveyor report. If the lake was built before the HOA existed, you've got a strong case, but you'll need documentation they can't dispute. After I hung up, I went back to the garage and pulled the folder again. Tucked in the back was the original deed from '98, when Peterson purchased the land and constructed the lake. The legal description was clear. The property extended 320 feet east from the main lot line, encompassing the man-made lake structure. It had been recorded with the county, notarized, and filed. I made copies and put the originals in a fireproof safe. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and stared out the window at the lake. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. I thought about Mainstay's expression, the way she'd looked at the land like she was already planning what to do with it. The name Bennett echoed in my mind. I pulled out my laptop and typed it into a search engine along with Willowbrook and construction. What I found made my blood run cold. Bennett Construction was a local development firm specializing in luxury residential projects. And according to a 2-year-old article in the local business journal, Vanessa Mainstay had partnered with them on multiple developments. I sat back, the pieces starting to fall into place. This wasn't about the HOA protecting community property. This was about Mainstay wanting my lake for herself. I looked out the window one more time. In the fading light, I could just make out 3 figures standing at the corner of the street, one of them pointing toward my property. Even from a distance, I recognized Mainstay's silhouette. Standing beside her was a man in a work vest holding what looked like architectural plans. They were already planning. They thought they'd won, but they didn't know what I had in that filing cabinet. And they sure as hell didn't know I wasn't going to roll over. I opened a new document on my laptop and started making notes. Every date, every conversation, every piece of evidence I could think of. If Vanessa Mainstay wanted a fight, she was going to get one. And I was going to make sure the whole community saw exactly who she really was. 48 hours came and went. I didn't sign anything. On Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of hammering outside. I'd been up late the night before reviewing documents and must have slept through the first few minutes of noise. By the time I pulled on jeans and a shirt and made it out to the lakefront, they were nearly finished. Mainstay and the same 2 board members from Tuesday, along with a maintenance worker driving a post into the ground near the water's edge. On top of the post was a laminated sign that read, Property of Willowbrook HOA, no trespassing. My chest tightened. I walked straight up to them. What the hell do you think you're doing? I said, louder than I intended. Mainstay turned to me with that same cold, practiced smile. Good morning, Mr. Garrett. Since you failed to comply with the HOA resolution, we're proceeding with enforcement. This is official notice. She handed me a manila envelope. I tore it open right there. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the HOA letterhead at the top. Official notice of violation, it read. Fine of $500 per day. Effective immediately. For unauthorized use of common property. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in a lien on your property. Below that was a reference to something called Covenant Article 12.3, unauthorized use of common property. I looked up at her, keeping my voice level this time. I'll be contesting this, I said. Mainstay's smile didn't waver. The HOA legal team will be happy to discuss that with you in court. You have 10 days to file an appeal. In the meantime, the fines are enforceable. She nodded to the maintenance worker, who stepped back to admire his work. Then they left. As soon as they were gone, I pulled out my phone and called the real estate attorney my colleague had recommended, a guy named Paul Hendricks who ran a small practice downtown. I explained the situation in detail, the HOA's claim, the new fine, and the threat of a lien. Hendricks listened carefully, asking questions about my documentation. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay, here's what you need to do. First, get a current surveyor report from a licensed professional. I need something recent that confirms the boundaries. Second, pull an official certified copy of your property deed from the county recorder's office, the one with all the stamps and seals, not just your personal copy. Third, get a copy of the HOA's master plan from 2005 when they were established. That's a public document under state law. They can't legally deny you access to it. If the lake isn't listed in that original plan as common property, they don't have a legal leg to stand on." I scribbled notes as fast as I could. "And the fine?" I asked. "Don't pay it," Hendricks said firmly. "Paying it could be interpreted as an admission that their claim is valid. Document everything. Keep all correspondence. And we'll build a case if they try to move forward with a lien. Also, start thinking about who might be willing to testify about the property's history. Long-term neighbors can be powerful witnesses." By 10 a.m., I was on the phone with Thompson and Associates, a surveying firm that had been in business for over 30 years. I explained what I needed, and they agreed to send someone out the next morning. Then I drove to the county recorder's office, a squat brick building downtown with fluorescent lights and rows of file cabinets. I stood at the counter and asked the clerk for a certified copy of the deed for my property, parcel ID 45-7832. She typed the number into an old computer, waited while the machine hummed, then nodded. "Give me about 20 minutes, she said. When she called my name, she handed me a thick envelope. Inside was the certified deed with the county seal, dated June 12, 1998. The legal description confirmed what I already knew, but now I had the official version Hendricks could use in court. I made 3 copies before leaving. One for Hendricks, one for my files, and one backup. As I walked back to my car, I felt the first real sense of momentum. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building a case. That afternoon, I knocked on the door of my neighbor, Harold Whitmore, a retired postal worker in his mid-70s who'd lived in Willowbrook since 1995. Whitmore answered the door in a flannel shirt and suspenders, a cup of tea in one hand. "Afternoon, son," he said. "What can I do for you?" I explained the situation, how Mainstay was claiming my lake belonged to the HOA. Whitmore's face darkened. "That woman," he muttered, shaking his head. "She tried this same nonsense back in 2005 when the HOA was first formed. It was a big mess, actually. Everyone in the neighborhood was talking about it. Old Man Peterson built that lake in '98, and when the HOA incorporated in '05, they tried to retroactively claim it as common property to boost amenities. Peterson fought them hard, threatened to sue, and they backed off real quick because they knew they had no documentation. The whole thing died down after a few months, but folks remembered it." He looked out toward my property, where the new HOA sign was visible in the distance. "But I'll tell you something else," Whitmore continued, lowering his voice. "When Mainstay tried to buy your property back in 2017, before you moved in, offered Peterson a serious amount of money, but he wouldn't sell. Always wondered why she was so fixated on it. Now I'm starting to think she never let that idea go. That information hit me hard. This wasn't about HOA authority at all. This was about unfinished business. I thanked Whitmore and walked back to my house, my mind spinning. If Mainstay had a documented history of trying to acquire this property, and if she was now leveraging her HOA position to force the issue, this was more than overreach. This was fraud, dressed up as governance. I sat down at my laptop and started digging deeper into Bennett Construction, the name she'd mentioned by the lake. Within an hour, I found a partnership filing from 2020 between Mainstay Realty and Bennett Construction. The filing listed a proposed luxury lakefront townhome development, status marked as pending site acquisition. When my stomach dropped, she wasn't taking my lake for the community. She was taking it to develop it herself and profit from it. The HOA was just the legal cover she was using. I saved the document, added it to my evidence folder, and sent a copy to Hendricks with a subject line that read, "Motive confirmed." Then I leaned back and stared out the window at the lake. The sun was starting to set, and the water looked peaceful, almost serene. But underneath that calm surface, a war was building. Mainstay thought she could hide behind bureaucracy and legal threats. What she didn't realize was that every move she made left a trail, and I was following it straight to the truth. Friday morning at 8 a.m., I opened my email and found a message that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, "Important community notice, property dispute update." It was from Mainstay, sent to the entire Willowbrook HOA mailing list, all 200 households. The HOA list was typically used for official announcements like maintenance schedules and community events, so residents generally trusted what came through it. I opened the message and felt my stomach drop. "Dear Willowbrook residents," it read, "we want to inform you of an ongoing property dispute involving Mr. Garrett at 42 Lakeside Drive. Despite HOA efforts to resolve this matter amicably, Mr. Garrett is refusing to comply with community regulations regarding the lake on his property, which has been identified as common community property under our master plan. His refusal to cooperate jeopardizes our neighborhood's property values and violates the covenant we all agreed to uphold. We urge all residents to support the HOA's legal action to protect our community's interests." The implication was clear. I was the problem. The selfish neighbor putting everyone else's home values at risk. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages from neighbors I barely knew. Some asking what was going on. Others outright hostile. One message read, "Why are you trying to ruin our property values?" Another said, "Just cooperate with the HOA. It's not that hard." I sat there watching the messages pile up, feeling 200 households turning against me based on a lie. I needed to respond, but I knew that firing back emotionally would only make things worse. Instead, I forwarded the email to Hendricks with a note. "Is this legal?" He called me back within 20 minutes. "Technically, yes," he said, "but it's walking a very fine line. If anything in that email is provably false, you could have grounds for a defamation claim. The key phrase here is jeopardizes property values. That's fear-mongering, not fact. And claiming the lake is common property when they have no legal documentation to support it, that's borderline slander of title." He paused. "Here's what you do. Don't respond to the email. Don't engage with neighbors who are upset. Let them cool down. Focus on gathering your evidence. Once we have the surveyor report and the master plan, we'll go public with the truth. Right now, Mainstay is controlling the narrative. We need to take that control back." I hung up and tried to focus. Every time I checked my phone, there were more messages, more judgment. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 6 years, kept to myself, never caused trouble, and now I was being painted as the villain. Mainstay knew exactly what she was doing, and it was working. Later that morning, the surveyor arrived. James Thompson was in his early 60s, calm and methodical, the kind of guy who'd clearly done this 1,000 times. He walked the property with a GPS unit, taking measurements, comparing coordinates to the deed I'd given him. It took about 3 hours. When he finished, he came up to the deck where I was waiting with coffee. "Well," he said, setting down his equipment, "the good news is your lake is definitely on your property. No question about it. The boundaries in the 98 deed match perfectly with the current GPS coordinates. The lake sits a full 40 feet inside your property line on the eastern edge. There's no encroachment on any HOA common area." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Can you put that in writing?" I asked. Thompson nodded. "I'll have an official surveyor report ready for you by Monday. It'll be notarized and certified, so it'll hold up in court if you need it. But I'll tell you something else," he said. lowering his voice slightly. "I've been doing surveys in this county for 35 years. I've seen HOAs pull some questionable stuff, but trying to claim a privately owned lake as common property, that's a new one. If they're pushing this hard, there's usually a financial motive behind it." I didn't tell him I'd already figured that part out. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. As I walked past the community center, I saw a group of residents standing near the entrance, talking in low voices. One of them, a woman in her 40s I recognized from HOA meetings, looked up and saw me. Her expression shifted immediately, from neutral to cold. She said something to the others, and they all turned to look at me. I kept walking, but I could feel their eyes on my back. When I got back to my house, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. There was a Bennett construction truck parked 2 houses down, ostensibly checking the vacant lot next door that had been for sale for months. But the man in the work vest wasn't looking at that lot. He was standing near the curb with a clipboard, looking directly at my property and the lake beyond. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the truck, zooming in on the license plate and the company logo. The man noticed me watching and quickly got back in the truck, made a note on his clipboard, and drove off. I saved the photo and sent it to Hendricks with a message. "Bennett Construction surveilling my property now," he responded almost immediately. "Document everything. This is escalating fast." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and reviewed what I had. The certified deed from '98 showing clear ownership. The partnership filing between Mainstay Realty and Bennett Construction. The mass email was sent to manipulate the neighborhood. The photo of the Bennett truck. Thompson's verbal confirmation that the surveyor's report would prove my boundaries. It was starting to come together. A picture of coordinated harassment designed to pressure me into giving up my property so Mainstay could profit from an $8 million development deal. I opened my laptop and started building a master file, organizing every document, every email, every interaction by date and category. Hendricks would need this if we went to court, and I wanted it airtight. Mainstay had underestimated me. She thought social pressure and legal threats would make me fold. What she didn't realize was that I'd spent 30 years managing complex construction projects, dealing with contractors, and navigating permits and regulations. I knew how to build a case, brick by brick, until it was unshakable. She'd just given me all the motivation I needed to take this fight all the way. Monday morning at 9 a.m., Thompson called. "Your surveyor report is ready," he said. "I'm emailing it over now, and I'll have the notarized hard copy couriered to you this afternoon." I opened my email and downloaded the file. It was 15 pages, meticulously detailed, with GPS coordinates, boundary maps, photographs of the property markers, and a side-by-side comparison with the 1998 deed. The conclusion was unambiguous. The man-made lake structure, constructed 1998, lies entirely within parcel ID 45-78832, owned by Mr. Garrett since 2018. No portion of the lake encroaches on Willowbrook HOA common area as defined in Master Plan 2005. I forwarded it immediately to Hendricks with a subject line that read, "We have proof." This was the smoking gun, the document that turned Mainstay's entire claim into a provable lie. For the first time in days, I felt like I was holding the winning hand. Hendricks called me back within the hour. "This is excellent," he said. "Now we need to get that HOA master plan from 2005. Under state law, HOA governing documents are public records for all homeowners. If they refuse to provide it, that's a violation of homeowner rights, and we can file a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission." He paused. "But before we do that, I want you to dig deeper into Mainstay's connection with Bennett Construction. You said you found a partnership filing. See if there's anything more recent, any contracts, any development proposals. If we can prove she's using her HOA position to benefit a private business deal, that's not just overreach, that's fraud." I hung up and went back to my laptop. I started with the county's public records database, which included all development applications and permit filings as part of the transparency requirements for zoning changes. I searched for any permits or proposals filed by Bennett Construction in Willowbrook. It took me about an hour, but then I found it. A development proposal was submitted to the County Planning Department on August 15th, just 2 weeks before Mainstay first showed up at my property. The proposal was for a luxury lakefront residential community, 12 high-end townhomes, estimated project value of $8 million. The location, right where my lake sat. My hands went cold as I read through the details. The proposal included architectural renderings showing townhomes arranged in a crescent around a central water feature, my lake. The site map showed the exact footprint of my property, labeled as pending acquisition from HOA common assets. That phrase was the key. Pending acquisition of HOA common assets. Mainstay hadn't just overstepped her authority. She had orchestrated this. She had partnered with Bennett Construction, filed a development proposal with the county, and then manufactured a legal claim on my property using her HOA position so she could hand it over to her business partner and profit from an $8 million project. This wasn't a misunderstanding or bureaucratic overreach. This was premeditated theft dressed up as community governance. I took screenshots of everything: the proposal, the site map, the renderings, the projected value, and saved them methodically. Then I kept digging. I found a meeting agenda from an HOA board meeting on August 10th, 5 days before the development proposal was filed. One of the agenda items read, "Discussion, reclamation of community lake property for future development." I pulled up the meeting minutes. They were sparse overall, but the secretary had captured the lake discussion in detail, likely because it was such an unusual and contentious topic. According to the notes, Mainstay had argued that the lake was a community asset that should be managed by the HOA. One board member, Philip Rayburn, had questioned whether the lake was actually HOA property, and Mainstay responded that the HOA legal team was reviewing the matter. But here's what stood out. The minutes noted that Mainstay refused to share the legal review with the board, citing confidentiality concerns. And she had stonewalled her own board members because she knew the lake wasn't HOA property. But she needed the claim to move forward with her development deal. I needed to talk to Rayburn. If he'd been skeptical back in August, he might be willing to confirm what really happened in that meeting. I found his contact information in the HOA directory and sent him a carefully worded email. "Mr. Rayburn, I'm reaching out regarding the ongoing dispute over the lake on my property. I've reviewed the August 10th board meeting minutes and noticed you raised questions about the HOA's claim. I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you privately about this matter. I have documentation that I believe you'll find very relevant." I hit send and waited. 2 hours later, Rayburn called me. "Mr. Garrett," he said, his voice cautious but curious. "I got your email. I'll be honest, I've had concerns about Vanessa's leadership for a while now. She's been pushing through decisions without consulting the board, refusing to share documentation, and shutting down questions. The lake issue was just the most blatant example. When I pressed her in that meeting, she made it clear my input wasn't welcome. I've been wondering ever since if there was more to it. I explained what I'd found: the surveyor report confirming my ownership, the development proposal Bennett Construction had filed showing my property as pending acquisition, the site map, and the $8 million project value. Rayburn was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Jesus, she's been lying to the board this whole time. I knew something felt off, but I didn't realize it was outright fraud. Do you have copies of those documents?" I told him I did, and he asked me to send them over. "I'm going to bring this to the other board members," he said. "If Vanessa is using her position to benefit a private business deal, that's a clear violation of her fiduciary duty. We have grounds to remove her, but you need to be ready. When we confront her, she's going to fight back hard. She's got allies in this community, and she won't go down quietly." I thanked Rayburn and hung up, feeling the shift in momentum. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building a case, brick by brick, and every piece of evidence made it stronger. I now had proof of Mainstay's motive, a board member willing to testify that she'd misled the board, and a paper trail showing a coordinated plan to seize my property for profit. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was a scandal, and it was about to break wide open. I opened a new document and started drafting a formal complaint to the State Real Estate Commission, outlining Mainstay's conflict of interest, her fraudulent use of HOA authority, and her attempt to seize private property for personal financial gain. I attached the surveyor report, the development proposal, the board meeting minutes, and the partnership filing between Mainstay Realty and Bennett Construction. When I finished, it was 23 pages long with 47 exhibits. I scheduled it to send the next morning, giving myself one more night to review it with fresh eyes. Mainstay had built her entire scheme on the assumption that I wouldn't dig deep enough, that I'd fold under social pressure, that no one would connect the dots. She'd miscalculated badly. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was dismantling her entire operation, one document at a time. Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m., the notarized hard copy of Thompson's surveyor report arrived by courier. I opened the envelope and held the document in my hands. 15 pages of certified, legally binding proof that the lake was mine. The cover page bore the state surveyor's seal, Thompson's license number, and a notarization stamp dated the previous day. This wasn't just evidence. This was a weapon, and I was ready to use it. I immediately sent digital copies to Hendricks and Rayburn. Hendricks called me within minutes. "This is bulletproof," he said. "No court in the country would side with the HOA after seeing this, but we need one more piece to complete the puzzle. We need the original HOA master plan from 2005. If that plan doesn't list your lake as common property, and I'm betting it doesn't, then Mainstay has zero legal standing. We can prove she fabricated the entire claim." He paused. "I'm drafting a formal records request to the HOA under state homeowner rights law. They have to comply within 10 business days, or we can file a complaint with the state." I hung up feeling the pieces fall into place. Every move I made now was tightening the case. That afternoon, I drove back to the county recorder's office. Under state open records law, all subdivision plats, property boundaries, and development filings are public documents to ensure transparency in land use and zoning. I wanted to pull every property record related to the original development of Willowbrook Estates. Going back to when the land was first subdivided, the clerk helped me navigate the database, and after about an hour of searching, I found what I needed: the original subdivision plat from 1995, filed by the developer who first created Willowbrook, showed every lot boundary, every easement, every designated common area. I traced my finger along the map until I found my parcel, Lot 42. The boundaries were clearly marked, and the lake area fell entirely within those boundaries. There was no designation of common property anywhere near my lot. I requested a certified copy of the plat and paid the $25 fee. When the clerk handed me the document, I felt another piece lock into place. This was the original blueprint of the neighborhood, filed a full decade before the HOA even existed. If the lake wasn't designated as common property in this original plat, then Mainstay's claim was built on absolutely nothing. I also asked the clerk to check for any amendments or updates to the plat filed after 2005, when the HOA was established. She searched the system and came back shaking her head. "No amendments," she said. "The original plat from '95 is still the official record." That sealed it. No amendments meant the HOA had never legally altered the property designations. They couldn't retroactively claim my lake without filing an amendment to the recorded plat, and they hadn't done that. I left with the certified plat in hand, adding it to the chain of documentation I'd built. Surveyor report proving current boundaries. Original deed from '98 proving ownership history. Subdivision plat from '95 proving the lake was never common property. It was 3 decades of ironclad proof. Mainstay could lie to the board and manipulate the community, but she couldn't rewrite county records. Later that evening, I received a call from Harold Whitmore. "Son," he said, his voice low and serious, "I thought you should know. I just got a call from Vanessa Mainstay. She asked me if I'd spoken to you recently, and she wanted to know if I'd be willing to make a statement supporting the HOA's claim on the lake. She knows I was here when Peterson built it, so I think she's worried I'll contradict her story. I told her I couldn't support the claim because I know for a fact the lake was always private property. She got really cold after that. Said something about how it would be a shame if I ended up on the wrong side of a community dispute." Whitmore paused. "I've lived here 30 years. I don't scare easily. But I wanted you to know she's trying to intimidate witnesses now. She's getting desperate." I thanked Whitmore and told him I'd let Hendricks know immediately. This was a critical escalation. Mainstay wasn't just lying anymore. She was actively trying to suppress anyone who could expose her. That desperation told me everything. She knew her claim was crumbling, and she was scrambling to hold it together. The next morning, I met with Hendricks at his office downtown. I brought the complete evidence file, the surveyor report, the certified deed, the subdivision plat, the development proposal, the board meeting minutes, and the partnership filing. He spent an hour reviewing each document, cross-referencing dates and legal citations. When he finished, he looked up and said, "This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen in 20 years of practice. Here's what we're doing. First, I'm filing a cease and desist letter to the HOA and Mainstay personally, demanding immediate removal of signage, rescission of all fines, and a public retraction. Second, I'm putting them on notice that if they don't comply within 7 days, we're filing suit for slander of title, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and abuse of authority. Third, I'm filing a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission alleging conflict of interest and fraudulent use of HOA power." He tapped the development proposal with one finger. "And fourth, I'm sending all of this to the county prosecutor's office. What Mainstay is doing crosses the line from unethical to potentially criminal. Attempted theft by deception is a felony in this state, and she's left a documented trail." Hendricks drafted the cease and desist letter while I waited, then printed it on his firm's letterhead. It was 3 pages, formal and uncompromising. "Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action seeking damages in excess of $500,000. It read, "We also reserve the right to report potential fraud to state and county authorities." He sealed it in an envelope and said, "This goes out certified mail today. Mainstay will have it by Friday. When she reads it, she's going to realize the walls are closing in." I left his office with a copy of the letter in hand, feeling the shift in momentum. I wasn't reacting anymore. I wasn't defending, I was prosecuting. Mainstay had built her scheme on the assumption that I wouldn't dig deep enough, that I'd buckle under social pressure, that no one would connect the dots between her HOA authority and her private business interests. She'd miscalculated completely. I'd built a case so airtight that her entire operation was about to collapse, not from force, but from the sheer weight of documented truth. And I was about to make sure the entire community saw it happen. Friday afternoon at 2 p.m., Mainstay received the cease and desist letter. I know because Rayburn called me an hour later. "Vanessa just stormed into an emergency board meeting," he said, his voice tense. "She's furious. She tried to get the board to authorize legal action against you, but I told her we need to see all the documentation first. The surveyor reports, the master plan, everything." She refused, said it was a waste of time, that the HOA's position was solid. Then I dropped the bomb. I told her I'd seen the development proposal from Bennett Construction, the one that lists your property as pending acquisition. Her face went white. Rayburn paused. 3 other board members are now demanding a special meeting. They want answers, and they want them in front of the whole community. We're scheduling it for next Friday, October 15th, at 7 p.m. at the community center. You should be ready to present your case." I thanked him and hung up, adrenaline surging through my veins. This was it, the public confrontation I'd been building toward, 1 week to prepare. I spent the next 6 days preparing a presentation with every key document organized into a clear timeline. Hendricks reviewed it and gave me one piece of critical advice. "Stick to facts," he said. "No emotion, no accusations, just documents and dates. Let the evidence speak for itself." I rehearsed 3 times, timing it to 15 minutes. Friday, October 15th, arrived. I got to the community center at 6:30 p.m. The parking lot was already filling up. By 7 p.m., the main meeting room was packed. I counted at least 180 residents, maybe more. Standing room only in the back. The tension in the room was thick. Many residents had grown frustrated with the HOA's lack of transparency over the past year. Everything from surprise fee increases to unapproved landscaping changes. So tonight's meeting had drawn an unusually large crowd, hungry for accountability. Mainstay sat at the front table with the board members, her expression cold and controlled, but I could see the tightness in her jaw. the way her fingers drummed against the table. Rayburn called the meeting to order and explained the agenda. We're here tonight to address the ongoing dispute regarding the lake property at 42 Lakeside Drive. Mr. Garrett has requested the opportunity to present documentation regarding his ownership claim. He nodded to me. I walked to the front, connected my laptop to the projector, and took a breath. I started with the surveyor report, projecting the boundary map on the screen with clear GPS coordinates. Certified surveyor report, completed September 25th. The lake sits entirely within my property boundaries, 40 feet inside the eastern line, no encroachment. I heard murmurs ripple through the crowd, people leaning forward. Next, I showed the original deed from '98, filed with the county 7 years before the HOA was established. The property boundaries include the lake. More murmurs, louder now. Then I displayed the subdivision plat from '95. Original plat for Willowbrook. No designation of common property near my lot. No amendments filed since. The room was shifting. People were whispering to each other, glancing between the screen and mainstay, whose expression had gone rigid. Then I pulled up the development proposal from Bennett Construction, dated August 15th. Luxury lakefront development, 12 townhomes, $8 million. Filed 2 weeks before the HOA claimed my lake. I zoomed in on one line. Pending acquisition from HOA Common Assets. I paused, letting it sink in. And here's the partnership filing, showing Vanessa Mainstay's real estate firm partnered with Bennett Construction on this exact project. The room erupted. People were shouting questions, standing up, and pointing at Mainstay. The energy in the room had completely flipped. Mainstay shot to her feet. Her face flushed red. "This is a witch hunt," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The HOA has every right to manage community assets, and this lake affects property values for everyone here." But her words sounded hollow now, defensive. Rayburn leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Vanessa, did you disclose your business relationship with Bennett Construction to the board when you proposed reclaiming the lake?" She opened her mouth, hesitated, her eyes darting to the side for just a fraction of a second. That's not relevant to the HOA's authority," she stammered. "The lake falls under community management guidelines." But the hesitation had done the damage. The room saw it. I saw it. Rayburn saw it. A woman in the third row stood up. "If you're trying to take his property to profit from a development deal, that's fraud, not governance." Others joined in, voices rising, demanding answers. Mainstay's carefully constructed authority was crumbling in real time, and there was nowhere for her to hide. Rayburn raised his hand to quiet the room. "I'm calling for an emergency vote," he said. "All in favor of temporarily suspending President Mainstay's authority pending a full investigation into conflict of interest. Raise your hand." Hands shot up across the room. I counted quickly. At least 150, maybe more. Rayburn nodded. "Motion carries. Vanessa, you're suspended effective immediately." Mainstay stood frozen for a moment, her mouth open. Then she grabbed her bag and walked out of the room without another word, the door slamming behind her. The room stayed silent for a beat. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, not for me, but for the truth finally coming to light. The following Monday, the HOA board held an emergency session with all members present except Mainstay. Rayburn, now acting president, called me that evening. "We've made our decision," he said. "The board is formally retracting all claims on your lake property, rescinding every fine, and issuing a public apology to you and the community. We're also terminating Vanessa's position as president effective immediately." The vote was unanimous. He paused. "And there's more. We've reported everything to the State Real Estate Commission. They've opened a formal investigation into her conduct." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you," I said, "for doing the right thing." Rayburn's voice softened. "You did the hard work. You stood up when most people would have just given in. The community needed to see that." So 2 days later, I received an official letter from the HOA on new letterhead, signed by Rayburn and the other board members. It was an apology, clear and unambiguous, acknowledging that the lake had always been my private property and that the HOA had acted improperly. The letter also confirmed that all fines, totaling $500, were voided, and the HOA would reimburse me $15,000 for legal fees, surveyor costs, and emotional distress. It wasn't about the money. It was about the acknowledgement, the public record that I'd been right all along. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Hendricks. The State Real Estate Commission just issued its findings, he said. Mainstay's real estate license has been suspended for 2 years. She's been fined $25,000 for conflict of interest and misuse of fiduciary authority. Bennett Construction has also terminated its partnership with her and filed a breach of contract suit. He paused. And here's the kicker. The county prosecutor's office has opened a preliminary investigation into attempted theft by deception. No charges yet, but it's on the record. Her reputation in this industry is finished. I hung up and walked out to the lake. It was a clear afternoon, the water reflecting the sky like glass. I walked down to the edge where Mainstay had planted that sign weeks ago, the one that read Property of Willowbrook HOA. I'd left it there deliberately, waiting for this moment. Now I pulled it out of the ground and carried it to the garage. Then I went back inside and retrieved something I'd been working on for the past week. A wooden sign I'd carved myself. The letters were deep and clean, burned into the oak with a woodworking tool. It read, Private Property, Garrett Family Lake, established 1998. I drove the post into the same spot where Mainstay's sign had been, tamping the earth down firmly. The sign stood solid and straight, catching the afternoon sunlight. I stepped back and looked at it, then at the lake beyond, the water peaceful and undisturbed. This wasn't just about property rights. It was about standing up to power when power oversteps, about using the system correctly when the system is abused, about proving that truth, backed by evidence and persistence, will always outlast lies. I took a photo of the sign with the lake in the background and sent it to Hendricks, Rayburn, and Whitmore with a simple message. It's over. Thank you. Whitmore texted back almost immediately. You earned this, son. Enjoy your lake. And I did. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't won with force, but with patience, evidence, and the courage to stand up for what's right. If you've ever dealt with an HOA overstepping its authority, or if you believe justice should be built on facts, not power, this story is for you. Support this channel, Karma Neighbors, by subscribing and sharing. Let's hold the line together.